My mother demanded my sons' wish lists, promising the Christmas of their dreams. Instead, I watched in horror as she gifted their exact wishes to my sister's children while mine sat empty-handed. I didn't scream. I just left. But a single voicemail from my grandfather the next day changed everything. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in the car was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against my chest and made it difficult to breathe. Usually, the drive home from my mother's house on Christmas Day was filled with the chaotic, sugar-fueled energy of two young boys comparing loot, arguing over who got the better toys, and asking a million questions about battery sizes and assembly times. But today, the silence was absolute. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Leo, my 8-year-old, was staring out the window at the gray, slushy streets, his forehead resting against the cold glass. He wasn't asleep, though I wished he were. His eyes were red-rimmed and wide open, blinking slowly. Beside him, 6-year-old Sam was clutching his seatbelt strap with a white-knuckled grip, his lower lip trembling every few seconds as he fought back another wave of tears. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the steering wheel at 10 and 2 just to keep the car in a straight line. A bitter, metallic taste coated my tongue, the taste of adrenaline and suppressed rage. I felt physically ill, my stomach churning, with a mixture of nausea and heartbreak that was far worse than any flu I had ever battled. It wasn't just that we had left early. It wasn't just that the festive atmosphere had curdled into something toxic. It was the look on my mother's face when I finally stood up. It was the smug satisfaction radiating off my sister, Sarah. But mostly, it was the devastation I saw in my boy's eyes. I pulled into our driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel. I turned off the engine, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the garage door, replaying the last 3 hours in my mind like a horror movie I couldn't turn off. I felt hollowed out. As a mother, your primal instinct is to protect your children from pain. You act as a shield against the world's cruelty. But how do you protect them when the cruelty comes from their own grandmother? How do you explain to a 6-year-old that he isn't loved as much as his cousins? Mom, Leo's voice was small, cracking slightly. Are we going to see Grandpa Arthur soon? I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing a mask of calm onto my face before I turned around. Yes, baby, we'll call him tomorrow, I promise. Okay, he whispered. He looked down at his empty lap. Because I don't think Grandma Linda likes my drawings anymore. The words felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I unbuckled my seatbelt, my fingers fumbling with the latch, and climbed into the back seat to pull them both into a fierce hug. They buried their faces in my coat, and I felt the hot dampness of their tears soaking through the wool. I held them there for a long time, staring out at the bleak winter sky, realizing that the family I thought I had, the safety net I thought existed, had just been slashed to ribbons. I had spent years making excuses for her, years swallowing insults to keep the peace, years trying to buy my mother's affection with compliance. But today, the currency had changed. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis of a terminal illness. It was a deliberate, calculated amputation of my children's hearts. Once we were inside the house, the atmosphere was somber, like the air after a funeral. We didn't turn on the Christmas lights. We didn't play carols. The tree in the corner of our living room, which we had decorated with so much joy just weeks ago, now looked mocking. I made the boys hot chocolate, the real kind, with melted chocolate chips and heavy cream, piled high with marshmallows. It was a pathetic attempt to put a bandage on a bullet wound, but it was the only thing I could think to do. Can we just watch a movie? Sam asked, his voice devoid of its usual pep. I don't want to play with. Well, I don't have anything to play with. Of course, I said, my voice tight. We can watch whatever you want. As they settled onto the couch, wrapped in blankets, I went into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, finally letting the facade crack. I pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to stop the images from flooding back, but they were relentless. 3 weeks ago, that was when the trap had been set. I remembered the phone call vividly. My mother, Linda, had called me, her voice dripping with a sweetness that usually preceded a request for money or a favor. "Alexandra, darling," she had cooed, "I've been talking to your grandfather and we want to do something truly magical this year. Arthur gave me a budget, a very generous one, to handle all the shopping since he's not mobile enough to hit the stores." "That's nice of him," I had replied, wary but hopeful. "It is, but I need help. I don't want to just guess what the boys want. I want them to draw it. Have Leo and Sam sit down and draw exactly what they want. The big gift. The one thing they're dreaming of. Have them write a letter explaining why they want it too. It'll be cute for the scrapbook, and it ensures I get the right model numbers or whatever." I had been so touched. I thought finally she's trying. Leo, my artistic soul, had spent 3 days on his drawing. He wanted a specific, high-end architecture Lego set, the massive one with thousands of pieces. He drew it in perspective, coloring every brick. He wrote a paragraph about how he wanted to be an architect like his great-grandfather Arthur used to be. Sam, sweet and obsession-prone, wanted a professional-grade art marker set and a specific easel. He drew a picture of himself painting a portrait of Grandma. We had driven over to her house a week later to deliver the letters. I watched my boys hand them to Linda with shining eyes. She had clutched the papers to her chest, feigning emotion. "Oh, these are precious. Leave it to Grandma. Christmas morning is going to be spectacular." Spectacular, that was the word she used. Fast forward to this morning, the spectacular reveal. We had arrived at Linda's expansive house at 9:00 a.m. Sarah and her husband, Mark, were already there, lounging on the sofas with mimosas in hand. Sarah's 2 children, Kyle and Chloe, were running wild, screaming and knocking things over. Sarah didn't bat an eye. When it was time for presents, Linda took center stage. She sat in her high-backed armchair like a queen holding court. "All right, everyone," she announced, clapping her manicured hands. "Santa was very specific this year." She started handing out boxes. Leo and Sam sat patiently, their hands folded, just as I had taught them. They watched as Kyle ripped open a box. It was the Lego set. Not just a Lego set, it was the architecture series set, the exact one Leo had drawn, the exact one he had spent hours researching. I felt a jolt of confusion. Maybe she bought 2? Kyle didn't even like Legos. He liked video games and remote control cars. He looked at the box, frowned, and tossed it aside. "Boring, where's the drone?" Leo's breath hitched. He looked at me, confusion clouding his face. Then Chloe opened her gift. The professional art easel, the marker set, the exact brand Sam had carefully copied the logo of in his drawing. Chloe was 4, she liked finger painting. She looked at the easel and kicked it. I wanted a pony robot. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Linda. She was sipping her mimosa, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper, Those are the gifts Leo and Sam asked for." Linda waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, Alexandra, don't be dramatic. Sarah's kids need stimulation. Besides, I got your boys something practical." She pointed to 2 small, flat packages under the tree. Leo and Sam walked over, their movements slow, like they were walking underwater. They unwrapped them. Socks, a pack of generic white athletic socks, and a coloring book from the dollar store, the kind with the gray, rough paper. "I thought they could use them for school," Linda said brightly, "and the coloring books are for, well, keeping them quiet." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah let out a sharp, barking laugh. "Oh my God, Mom, socks? That's hilarious, you're so practical." "Well, Alexandra is always complaining about how fast they grow out of clothes," Linda said, her eyes locking on mine with a cold, predatory glint. "I'm helping." That was the moment. That was when I realized this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mix-up. It was a message. It was a deliberate humiliation of my children to elevate her golden child's offspring. She had used my son's own dreams as a shopping list for her favorites. I looked at Leo. He wasn't crying yet. He was staring at the Lego set lying discarded on the floor by his cousin's foot. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I simply walked over to my boys, took their hands, and said, "Get your coats." "Leaving already?" Sarah sneered. "We haven't even had brunch. Mom made quiche." "We're leaving," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You're being ungrateful," Linda snapped, her facade of sweetness dropping instantly. "I spent good money on those socks. You always make everything about you, Alexandra. You're ruining Christmas." I didn't respond. I marched my boys out the door, leaving the socks and the coloring books on the floor. Now, standing in my kitchen, the memory made me want to scream until my throat bled. How could she? How could a grandmother be so casually cruel? My phone buzzed on the counter, snapping me out of the trance. It was a text from Sarah. "Mom is crying. I hope you're happy. You're such a brat. You embarrassed us in front of Mark. Apologize to Mom or don't bother coming to New Year's." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the block button. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me, that I would come crawling back like I always did, apologizing for having feelings, begging for scraps of their affection. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgot that I was the one who managed Grandpa Arthur's personal correspondence. They had forgotten that while Linda controlled the social calendar, I was the one who helped him set up his email and his banking app. And they had definitely forgotten that Grandpa Arthur, despite his frailty, detested a liar more than anything else on earth. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the history. You have to understand that I have spent my entire adult life trying to buy my mother's love with labor, while my sister Sarah bought it with existence. I am a freelance illustrator. I work hard. I built a career from scratch, pulling all-nighters, taking on unglamorous corporate gigs, and saving every penny to provide a stable life for Leo and Sam after my husband left us 3 years ago. My life is defined by discipline and sacrifice. Sarah is a lifestyle curator. That's what her Instagram bio says. In reality, she is 32, unemployed, and married to Mark, a man who fancies himself an entrepreneur, but mostly just loses money on crypto schemes and sports betting. Yet, in Linda's eyes, Sarah is the fragile flower that must be protected, and I am the draft horse that must pull the cart. Growing up, it was always the same. If Sarah broke a vase, it was because I distracted her. If Sarah failed a class, it was because the teacher was jealous of her beauty. If I got straight A's, it was expected. If I won an art competition, Linda would ask why the prize money wasn't more substantial. When my dad passed away 10 years ago, the dynamic calcified. Linda turned all her attention to Sarah, perhaps seeing a younger version of herself, vain, shallow, and concerned only with appearances. Then there was the person of influence. The real rot at the core of our family wasn't just Linda's narcissism, it was Sarah's whispering. Sarah had perfected the art of the victim complex. She knew exactly how to manipulate Linda's insecurities. She would drop little comments, dripping with poison. "Alexandra thinks she's better than us because she has a career, Mom," she would say over wine. "She looks down on you. She thinks your taste is tacky." Or, "Alexandra told me she thinks you're getting too old to manage the family holidays. She wants to take over." It was all lies, but Linda, terrified of irrelevance, ate it up. She punished me to prove she was still the matriarch. This year, the financial stakes were higher than usual. Grandpa Arthur, Linda's father, had moved into an assisted living facility. He was incredibly wealthy, old money from a manufacturing empire he built in the 70s. But his health was failing, and he had started delegating financial tasks. He had trusted Linda with the Christmas fund. Grandpa Arthur was a man of fairness. He was the only person in the family who saw me. When I graduated college, he was the one who bought me my first professional drafting table. When my husband left, he was the one who paid for the lawyer to ensure I got full custody. "You have a spine, Allie," he used to tell me, tapping his cane on the floor. "Your mother and sister, they have wishbones where their spines should be." But lately, Arthur had been distant. His hearing was going, and he was often confused in the evenings. Linda had used this to gatekeep him. She controlled his phone. She controlled his visitors. "Dad is too tired today," she would tell me when I tried to visit. "He doesn't recognize people well today. Best not to upset him." I believed her. I thought she was protecting him. Now, I realized she was isolating him. I thought about the specific request Linda had made about the drawings. She had emphasized that Arthur wanted the drawings. Wait. A thought struck me, sharp and sudden. If Arthur wanted the drawings, did he see them? Linda had taken the letters and drawings from the boys. She said she would show them to Grandpa. But did she? Or did she take the money Arthur gave her, money that was clearly earmarked for specific, requested gifts, and use it to buy those exact items for Sarah's kids to curry favor with her golden child? It made perfect sense. Sarah had probably complained that she couldn't afford a good Christmas for Kyle and Chloe because of Mark's latest bad investment. Linda, unable to say no to Sarah's tears, likely decided that family moan. I is family money, and redirected the funds. She justified it, I'm sure. Alexandra is doing fine, she works. Sarah needs help, the boys won't know the difference. But she was wrong, she was so incredibly wrong. I looked at the clock. It was 3:00 p.m. on Christmas Day. I walked over to the kitchen drawer where I kept my emergency files. I pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. Inside was a list of passwords and contact numbers Grandpa Arthur had given me 2 years ago, just in case your mother loses her head. I had never used them. I felt it would be a betrayal of the hierarchy. But looking at my sons, huddled together on the couch, watching a cartoon with the volume low, looking like refugees in their own home, the hierarchy didn't matter anymore. I flipped the notebook open. There was a number for his private line, the landline in his room at the facility that Linda didn't know I had. I hesitated. If I called and told him, I would be starting a war. I would be the tattletale Linda always accused me of being. Then I remembered Leo's face when he saw his Lego set in Kyle's hands. I remembered Sam kicking the floor, clutching his dollar store coloring book. I picked up the phone. But before I could dial, the screen lit up. Voicemail received. It was from Grandpa Arthur. My heart stopped. Had he heard? Had Linda spun the narrative already? Was he calling to scold me for ruining Christmas and leaving early? I pressed play, my hand trembling. I held the phone to my ear. The message started with a rustling sound, then a heavy sigh. Then his voice, raspy, weak, but unmistakably sharp, cut through the static. "Allie, it's Grandpa. I tried to call your mother, but she's not answering. I just wanted to ask." He paused, and I could hear him wheezing slightly. "Did the boys like the gifts? Did Leo get the architecture set? I've been waiting all morning for a picture. I made sure to write the check for the exact amount plus tax. I wanted to see him build it. Please, send me a picture, Allie. I need to know I did good." The message ended. I stood there, frozen, the phone slipping from my numb fingers and clattering onto the counter. He didn't know. He had paid for them. He had specifically funded those gifts. He thought my boys were playing with them right now. Linda hadn't just played favorites. She had embezzled money from her dying father and lied to him about it, using his generosity to fund her favoritism, leaving him waiting by the phone for a thank you that would never come. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of cold, hard fury. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I looked at my reflection in the window. The sad, tired mother who just wanted peace was gone. I picked up the phone again. I didn't call him back. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop. I had work to do. I stared at the laptop screen, the cursor blinking rhythmically against the white background of the login page. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a chaotic drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. For a moment, I hesitated. This felt like a violation. I had been raised to respect privacy, to never snoop, to trust my elders implicitly. But that trust had been weaponized against my children. I typed in the username, Arthur J. Personal. Then the password. It was an old inside joke between us, a combination of his favorite classic car and the year he founded his company. I held my breath and hit enter. The screen refreshed. Welcome, Arthur. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun initially. I was just looking for confirmation of the Christmas fund. I navigated to the checking account, labeled discretionary spending. This was the account Grandpa used for gifts, hobbies, and personal expenses, the one Linda had access to as a signatory to help him manage. I scrolled down to December. The entries were sparse: a pharmacy charge, a subscription renewal for his history magazine. And then there it was. December 2nd, check 1405, paid to Linda Miller. Memo, grandkids' Christmas wish list, amount $4,000. I gasped, the air sucked out of the room. $4,000. My hands flew to my mouth. He hadn't just given her enough for the Lego set and the easel. He had given her enough to buy those gifts 5 times over. He had given her enough to fill the entire living room with presents for all 4 great-grandchildren equally. I quickly did the mental math. The architecture Lego set was expensive, around $350. The art supplies Sam wanted were maybe $200 for the high-end stuff. Sarah's kids' gifts, even if she bought them duplicates, the total couldn't have exceeded $1,200. Where was the other $2,800? And more importantly, why were my children given socks? I needed more than just a digital line item. I needed to see him. I needed to hear the instructions he gave her directly. I needed to know if there was any ambiguity she could hide behind. Boys. I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. Put your shoes back on. We're going to see Grandpa. But it's Christmas, Leo said, looking up from the floor where he was idly flipping through the dollar store coloring book. Is Grandma Linda going to be there? No, I said firmly, just us and Grandpa. The drive to the assisted living facility was a blur of gray slush and festive lights that looked garish against the gloom. When we arrived, the receptionist smiled sympathetically. Here for Arthur? He's been asking if anyone was coming all day. My heart broke a little more. Linda hadn't even visited. She had taken his money, spent it on her favorite daughter, and left him alone on Christmas Day. We walked down the quiet hallway to room 302. I knocked softly. Come in, his voice croaked. Grandpa Arthur was sitting in his recliner by the window, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked frail, his skin like parchment paper, but his eyes lit up when he saw the boys. There they are, he beamed, reaching out a trembling hand. Merry Christmas, did you get the loot? Did you bring pictures? Leo and Sam hesitated. They were terrible liars. They looked at me, panic in their eyes. I stepped forward, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of glass. The boys, they were so overwhelmed, Grandpa. We left the big gifts at Grandma's house for safekeeping so they wouldn't get broken in the car. But they wanted to come see you to say thank you. It was a mercy lie. I couldn't shatter his heart on Christmas. Not yet. Ah, smart, Arthur nodded, satisfied. That Lego set is complicated. Don't want to lose the pieces. He looked at me, his gaze sharpening. And the check, did Linda tell you? I gave her $4,000. $2,000 for your boys, $2,000 for Sarah's. I wanted to make sure they got exactly what they drew. No generic junk this year. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. $2,000 for my sons. She mentioned you were generous. I managed to say, my voice tight. Generous, it's my job, he chuckled, then coughed, clutching his chest. When he recovered, he pointed to the small desk in the corner. Check the blue folder, Allie. I kept the carbon copy. I wrote the specific instructions on the memo line so she wouldn't forget. My memory is going, but I make sure to write things down. I walked over to the desk. My fingers brushed the blue leather folder. I opened it. There it was, the carbon copy of Check 1405. In his shaky, distinct handwriting, the memo line read, $2K for Leo, Lego, and Sam Art. $2K for Sarah's kids. There was no ambiguity, no use your discretion. It was a direct order from the patriarch. I pulled out my phone and snapped a high-resolution photo of the check. Then I took a picture of the bank statement on his iPad, which was sitting on the desk. "Is everything okay, Allie?" Arthur asked, sensing the shift in my energy. I turned to him, pocketing my phone. I walked over and kissed his forehead, smoothing back his thin white hair. "Everything is going to be sorted out, Grandpa. I promise. We just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine," he whispered, squeezing my hand. "I just want everyone to be happy. I don't have many Christmases left, Allie. I want them to be fair." "They will be," I vowed. "I'm going to make sure of it." The drive back to my house was silent, but this time it wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence of tactical planning. I dropped the boys off with my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, a sweet older woman who treated them like her own grandchildren. "Emergency errand," I told her. She took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. Then I drove to Linda's house. I didn't call ahead. I knew they would still be there, picking over the leftovers of the brunch I had walked out on, drinking wine, and validating each other's wretched behavior. When I walked in the front door, the warmth of the house hit me, carrying the scent of cinnamon and expensive perfume. They were in the living room. Sarah was lounging on the sofa, a new diamond tennis bracelet glittering on her wrist as she scrolled through her phone. Mark was asleep in the armchair. Linda was organizing the pile of gifts, Sarah's gifts, into neat stacks. The conversation stopped instantly when they saw me. "Well," Linda said, straightening up, her face setting into a mask of haughty disapproval. "Look who decided to come back. I assume you're here to apologize. Sarah was very upset by your little stunt." "I'm not here to apologize," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I didn't take off my coat. I stood in the archway of the living room, blocking their exit." "Then why are you here?" Sarah scoffed, not looking up from her phone. "To beg for the socks back." "I'm here to ask about the $4,000, I said. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire. Linda's face went pale, then instantly flushed a deep, blotchy red. "Sigh, I don't know what you're talking about." "Check number 1405, I recited, stepping into the room. Dated December 2nd. Written by Arthur. Memo line, $2,000 for Leo and Sam, $2,000 for Sarah's kids, specifically for the Lego set and the art supplies." Sarah sat up, her eyes narrowing. "You went to the nursing home, on Christmas, you snitch." "I went to visit my grandfather," I corrected her, keeping my eyes locked on Linda. "He showed me the carbon copy, Mom. He told me he gave you explicit instructions. He thinks Leo is building that Lego set right now. He thinks Sam is painting on that easel." I pointed a shaking finger at the pile of toys in the corner, the toys my sons had dreamed of, now sitting in Sarah's pile. "You took the money he designated for my children, bought their gifts, and gave them to Sarah's kids. And then you bought my son's dollar store socks with the change." "It's not that simple," Linda shrieked, her poise shattering. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Sarah needed a win, Mark has been having a hard time, and—" "So you stole from your father," I cut in, "and you stole from your grandsons." "I didn't steal," Linda shouted. "I reallocated. I am the power of attorney. I decide what is best for the family. You have a job, Alexandra. You're independent. Sarah needs support. Arthur would understand if he had all his faculties, but he's old and confused." "He seemed pretty clear to me," I said coldly. "He was clear enough to write it down." "You wouldn't dare tell him," Linda sneered, crossing her arms. Her fear was morphing into aggression. "You wouldn't dare upset him. It would kill him, you know that. You're going to keep your mouth shut, or you'll be the one who gave him a heart attack." "And what about the rest of the money?" I asked, ignoring her threat. "The check was for $4,000. The toys cost maybe $1,500 total. Where is the rest, Mom? I looked at Sarah's wrist. The diamond bracelet caught the light. Did Grandpa buy that too? I asked. Sarah instinctively covered her wrist. Mark bought this for me. With what money? I shot back. He hasn't worked in 6 months. Get out, Linda screamed, pointing at the door. Get out of my house. You are jealous, vindictive, and petty. If you say one word to your grandfather, I will cut you out of this family forever. You won't see a dime of inheritance, and you won't be welcome in this house. I don't want your money, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. And I certainly don't want to be in this house. I turned to leave, but stopped at the door. But Mom, you forgot one thing. I don't need to tell Grandpa to hurt him. I need to tell him to protect him. Because if you did this with the Christmas money, what else have you been doing? Linda's eyes widened in genuine terror for a fraction of a second. That was all the answer I needed. I didn't go home immediately. I went to my office, a small studio space I rented downtown. I needed high-speed internet, a printer, and absolute focus. Linda's threat had backfired. If she had apologized, if she had shown an ounce of remorse, maybe I would have hesitated. But she had doubled down. She had used my grandfather's health as a shield for her greed. I opened my laptop again. I still had the login. I didn't just look at the Christmas month this time. I went back, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. What I found made the Christmas theft look like petty larceny. It started small. Grocery bills that were clearly for a family of 4, not one man in assisted living. Gas station fill-ups for a car Arthur no longer drove. Then the transfers got bigger. August 15th, $3,500 to S. Miller, Sarah. Memo, consulting. Sarah had never consulted on anything in her life. September 1st, $1,200 to Mark D. Memo, car repair. October 10th, $5,000, cash withdrawal. I started printing. The printer whirred rhythmically, spitting out page after page of evidence. I used my highlighter, marking every suspicious transaction in neon yellow. It was a roadmap of exploitation. Linda had been treating Grandpa's life savings as her personal piggy bank to subsidize Sarah's lifestyle and maintain her own image as the benevolent matriarch. My phone buzzed incessantly, text from Linda. You're overreacting. Don't ruin New Year's. I'll send you a check for $500 next week, okay? Just drop it. If you tell Arthur, you are dead to me. Then a text from Sarah, you're just jealous because Mom loves me more. Grow up. I didn't reply. I was building a timeline. I found a transfer from 3 years ago, right around the time my husband left. I remembered asking Linda for a loan to help with the divorce lawyer. She had told me, we just don't have the liquidity right now, darling. You'll have to figure it out. I checked the date. 2 days after she told me that, she had transferred $10,000 from Arthur's account to pay for a European reset trip for Sarah, who was stressed. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just favoritism, it was financial abuse. Systematic, long-term, and illegal. The next morning, I didn't go to the nursing home. I went to a lawyer. Mr. Henderson was an old friend of Grandpa Arthur's, a man who had semi-retired but kept a few key clients. He had drafted Arthur's original will. When I laid the stack of highlighted bank statements on his mahogany desk, his jovial expression vanished. He put on his reading glasses and flipped through the pages in silence. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. This is, he paused, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. This is bad, Alexandra. This is breach of fiduciary duty. This is theft. She has power of attorney, I said. Doesn't that give her the right to manage his assets for his benefit? Henderson corrected sharply. Not to funnel money to herself and her other daughter. This is self-dealing. And given Arthur's cognitive decline, it's elder abuse. I don't want her in jail, I said, though a part of me wasn't sure if that was true. I just want it to stop, and I want Grandpa to be safe. We can revoke the POA immediately, Henderson said, pulling a legal pad toward him. Arthur is still lucid enough to sign a revocation if we explain it clearly, but Linda will fight this. She will claim Arthur is incompetent and that she was acting in his interests. We need to present this to her in a way that gives her no room to maneuver. New Year's Eve, I said. Henderson looked up. Excuse me. The annual family party, I said. She's hosting it. Everyone will be there. Her friends, the extended family, the neighbors. She cares about her image more than anything. If I confront her privately, she'll lie and gaslight. If I do it legally, she'll drag it out in court and drain the accounts before we can stop her. I cannot advise a dramatic confrontation, Henderson warned, his lawyer brain kicking in. I'm not asking for advice on the drama, I said, standing up and gathering the papers. I'm asking you to have the revocation papers ready for Grandpa to sign on January 2nd. I'll handle the rest. I left his office with the dossier in my bag. I felt heavy, burdened by the destruction I was about to unleash. But then I thought of Leo's face looking at the socks. I thought of Grandpa Arthur waiting by the phone for a thank you he would never get. Linda wanted a show. She wanted to be the center of attention. I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. New Year's Eve at my mother's house was always a production. It was less of a family gathering and more of a theatrical performance designed to convince the neighborhood that Linda Miller was the paragon of upper-middle-class success. The driveway was packed with luxury SUVs. The house was lit up like a beacon, golden light spilling from every window onto the snow-covered lawn. Inside, I knew, there would be catered hors d'oeuvres, expensive champagne, and a room full of people pretending to like each other. I parked my modest sedan down the street, away from the valet service Linda had hired. I needed the walk. The cold air bit at my cheeks, sharpening my focus. In my bag, I carried the blue folder containing the bank statements, the copy of Check 1405, and the printouts of Sarah's consulting fees. I hadn't brought the boys. They were safe at Mrs. Higgins' house for a New Year's sleepover. This wasn't a scene for children. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots sounding like gunshots in the quiet night. I could hear the murmur of conversation and the clinking of glass from inside. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and opened the front door. The warmth rushed out to meet me, carrying the scent of pine and roasting meat. The foyer was crowded. I recognized neighbors, old family friends, and even the pastor from Linda's church. Linda was holding court in the center of the living room, wearing a shimmering silver gown that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Sarah was beside her, looking equally glamorous in black velvet, laughing loudly at something a neighbor was saying. Mark was at the bar, mixing drinks with a heavy hand. For a moment, nobody noticed me. I was the ghost at the feast. Then, Linda's eyes swept over the room and landed on me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face, before the mask slammed back into place. "Alexandra," she called out, her voice pitching up an octave. "You made it. We were worried you were going to sulk through the new year." The room quieted. Heads turned. Sarah smirked into her champagne flute. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice steady, carrying over the low hum of jazz music. I didn't take off my coat. I walked into the center of the room, stopping a few feet from Linda. "Well, grab a drink," Linda said, waving a hand to me. Sively. We were just about to do the pre-midnight toasts. I have a little announcement to make about the family's charitable giving this year. Of course she did. "Actually," I said, loud enough that the conversations in the corners of the room died down completely. "I have an announcement to make, too." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Alexandra, not now, don't be tedious." "It's about the family finances," I continued, ignoring her. I reached into my bag and pulled out the blue folder. Specifically, about Grandpa Arthur's finances. Sarah stiffened. Mark stopped stirring his drink. "What are you doing?" Linda hissed, her smile vanishing. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you make a scene here, I swear to God." "You made the scene, Mom," I said, my voice rising. "You made the scene when you stole $4,000 from a helpless old man on Christmas Day." A collective gasp went through the room. The pastor looked down at his shoes. The neighbors exchanged wide-eyed glances. "She's lying," Sarah shouted, stepping forward. "She's drunk. Mark, get her out of here." "I'm stone cold sober," I said. I opened the folder and pulled out the first sheet, the blown-up photo of the check. I held it up for the room to see. "This is a check written by Arthur Miller on December 2nd, I announced, projecting my voice like I was in a courtroom. The memo line reads, $2,000 for Leo and Sam, $2,000 for Sarah's kids. It was for specific gifts my sons asked for, a Lego set and an art easel." I turned to the guests. My sons got dollar store socks. Sarah's children got the Lego set and the easel. Mom cashed the check, bought the gifts for her favorite, and pocketed the difference. "That is a misunderstanding," Linda shrieked, her face turning a violent shade of purple. "He was confused. I used my discretion." "Discretion?" I pulled out the next sheet, the highlighted bank statement showing the transfers to Sarah. "Is it discretion to transfer $3,000 a month to Sarah for consulting? Is it discretion to pay for Mark's car repairs out of a dementia patient's account?" I threw the papers onto the coffee table. They fanned out, a damning spread of neon yellow highlights. "Look at it," I challenged the room. "Look at the dates. Every time Sarah needed a vacation, Grandpa paid for it. Every time Mark lost money, Grandpa covered it. Mom has drained nearly $70,000 from his accounts in the last 18 months. Mark looked like he was about to be sick. Sarah was trembling, tears of rage welling in her eyes. "You be *TCH, you jealousy-ridden little." "Stop it." The voice came from the hallway. Everyone turned. Standing there, leaning heavily on a cane, wearing his old tweed coat over his pajamas, was Grandpa Arthur. Beside him stood Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. The silence was absolute. You could hear the snow falling outside. "Dad," Linda whispered, all the color draining from her face. What are you doing here?" "I brought him," Mr. Henderson said grimly. "Alexandra called me. We picked him up an hour ago." Arthur hobbled into the room. He looked older than I had ever seen him, but his eyes were clear, burning with a fierce, disappointing fire. He looked at the papers on the table. He looked at Sarah's diamond bracelet. He looked at Linda. "I may be old, Linda," Arthur said, his voice raspy but filling the room. "And I may forget what I had for breakfast, but I know what a thief looks like." "Daddy, please," Linda sobbed, rushing toward him, her hands outstretched. "She's twisting everything. I take care of you. I do everything for you." Arthur held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "You took care of yourself. You used my love for this family to fund your vanity." He looked at Sarah. "And you let her. You took money from a man who can barely walk to buy. What? Jewelry? Trinkets?" Sarah burst into tears, burying her face in Mark's shoulder. "Mr. Henderson has the papers," Arthur said, looking at the lawyer. Henderson stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Miller, effective immediately, your power of attorney is revoked. All access to Mr. Miller's accounts has been frozen. We will be conducting a forensic audit of the last 5 years. Any funds that cannot be accounted for as direct care expenses will be considered a loan, to be repaid by the sale of your assets if necessary." Linda staggered back as if slapped. You can't do that. This is my house. I am your daughter." "You are my daughter," Arthur said, his voice breaking with grief. "And that is the only reason I am not calling the police tonight, but you are no longer my caretaker, and you are no longer the executor of my estate." He turned to me, his eyes softened. "Alexandra, take me home. I'm tired." I walked over to him and offered him my arm. "Let's go, Grandpa." As we walked out, leaving Linda sobbing amidst the ruins of her reputation and Sarah screaming. At Mark in the corner, I didn't look back. The party was over. The fallout was swift and brutal, just as Mr. Henderson had promised. By the first week of January, the forensic audit was in full swing. The numbers were staggering. It wasn't just the $70,000 I had found. Over 5 years, Linda had funneled nearly $250,000 into lifestyle maintenance for herself and Sarah. The legal threat was enough to terrify them into compliance. Linda agreed to a repayment plan that involved selling her vacation condo. Sarah and Mark had to downsize to an apartment they could actually afford. But the real resolution didn't happen in a lawyer's office. It happened 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in mid-January. I drove the boys to the assisted living facility. We had spent the last few weeks decompressing, recovering from the emotional whiplash of the holidays. I had explained to them that Grandma Linda had made a big mistake and was in time out for a while. They seemed to understand in the way resilient children do. When we walked into room 302, it looked different. I had brought in plants. I had pinned the boys' new drawings all over the walls. It looked less like a medical facility and more like a home. Grandpa Arthur was sitting up in his chair, looking better than he had in months. The stress of the deception, I realized, had been weighing on him too, even if he hadn't known the specifics. The truth had set him free. "Well," Arthur boomed as we walked in, "is it time?" "It's time," I smiled. I nodded to the boys. "Go ahead." Leo and Sam rushed forward, carrying a large shopping bag we had brought with us. They placed it on the floor in front of Arthur. "We got them, Grandpa," Leo chirped. They pulled out the boxes. A brand new architecture Lego set, the Taj Mahal this time, even bigger than the one Linda had stolen. And a deluxe art set for Sam, complete with a tabletop easel. "Mom took us to the store with the check you sent," Sam explained, his eyes shining. "And we got ice cream, too." Arthur had insisted on writing a new check directly to me the day after New Year's. He wanted to make sure the gift was given by his hand in the right way. "Open them," Arthur commanded, clapping his hands. "I want to see pieces everywhere." For the next 3 hours, my grandfather's room was a chaotic construction zone. Leo sat on the floor, sorting thousands of white bricks, explaining structural integrity to his great-grandfather. Sam set up his easel by the window, painting a portrait of the snowy trees outside. I sat in the corner, watching them. The knot of anger that had been in my chest since Christmas morning finally began to loosen. Justice had been served, yes. Linda was facing consequences, the money was safe, but this was the real victory. My boys were happy. They were loved. And they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that their worth wasn't determined by their grandmother's favoritism, but by the genuine love of the people who actually cared. Arthur caught my eye across the room. He winked. "You did good, Allie," he said softly, over the sound of clicking plastic bricks. "You stood up. You're the matriarch now." I smiled, tears prickling my eyes. "I'm just a mom, Grandpa." "That's the most important job there is," he replied. We stayed until dinner time. As we packed up to leave, Leo ran back and hugged Arthur's legs. "Best Christmas ever, Grandpa, even if it was late." "Best Christmas ever," Arthur agreed, hugging him back. We walked out into the crisp winter evening. The air smelled clean. The heavy burden of toxic secrets was gone. We had lost some family members along the way, true. Linda and Sarah were distant memories now, angry ghosts in a past life. But looking at my boys, walking ahead of me, hand in hand, I knew we had saved the parts of the family that truly mattered. And that was the greatest gift of all.